Greetings, Augies worldwide. I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, and welcome to Ask Dave, where I try to answer viewer questions that are submitted either to hamradioanswers@gmail.com or are put on my webpage at dcasler.com/ask-dave. Let's take a look. We're accompanied here today by Trevor Oman, a third-year film student at BYU, who's helping with a lot of details behind the camera, and so we're putting him in front of the camera to ask the questions. All right, what have we got?
All right, Bruce, call sign KD2ORG, has a question about his antenna placement.
Well, let's take a look here. He's considering purchasing an Isotonic 40-20 meter antenna and mounting it on the TV antenna. I have no experience with that particular antenna. They're very unusual. I'll be interested in your experience with it. Plan A is to build a homemade magnetic loop. The problem with the homemade magnetic loop is the capacitor that you have to get for that. I do have one that I've seen come through here that had a homemade capacitor. It can be done. The Isotonic idea would have to be trouble-free, is not able to climb roofs or make changes and adjustments. I'm getting that way too. I haven't been on our roof in quite a while. Is it okay to mount the Isotonic antenna so close to a TV antenna? Could it cause RFI in the house? The answer is yes, it could. The only way to know is to find out. I'm sorry, I can't predict in advance. Do Isotonics require grounding and or lightning arresting? Lightning arresting I would do where the cable enters the house. Bring it all the way down to your ground rod, your signal ground rod, the one for your station, and put the lightning arrestor there and then bring the coax into the house. By the way, that really reduces the amount of noise too. As far as grounding, you'll have to look in the manual for the Isotonics antenna. Currently stationed in Asia, my ultimate goal is DX with all countries across the Pacific. Hoping he can do that with 100 watts and a 35-year-old Kenwood TS830S. So, if it sounds like you don't have much room there. He says no land or nearby trees where he can mount an antenna. So you can also look at antennas that are vertical antennas that don't require radials. Something like the R7, R8, or R9. There are other antennas like that. The Cushcraft AV640 has enjoyed some popularity. Those are antennas that can be put up on a fairly small rooftop without need for a ground plane, and so they work well where you have some vertical space but don't have much horizontal space. So good luck, Bruce, and I hope to work you from Asia.
All right, Jeffrey, call sign KM4MEJ, wants to know the pros and cons of a horizontal delta loop.
Getting ready to dive into HF and building a delta loop. Yes, his question is, can he lose HF benefits by using a horizontal antenna versus an antenna that can give me vertical polarization? There's nothing wrong with either one. If you've got a horizontal delta loop, I had a horizontal four-sided loop for quite a while and used that as my primary antenna, and it worked pretty well. I was pleased with it. On lower frequencies, it has really weird radiation patterns, mostly straight up, so it's good for NVIS. So I would build the thing big enough, if you can, that it could handle 80 meters, if not that, 40 meters. And it's one wavelength all the way around on the base frequency. So 40 meters would be 132 feet around. Double that for an 80 meter one. And then with a wide range antenna tuner, you can use that all the way up, all through HF. So good luck with your antenna there. You will need a wide range tuner, and probably should feed it with ladder line or window line.
Philip, call sign WRBL869, wants to know about portable GMRS repeater box and wants your opinion on antennas.
Well, I know nothing about GMRS. It's a whole different ball game, and it's different manufacturers with different brand names on that. I'm really sorry, I'm not a good source for GMRS.
All right. Jason, call sign KM4FPZ, wants to know your opinion on call sign license plates as well as ground radials.
Well, they're not technically vanity call sign plates here in Colorado, and there's only a $2 fee for them. They have here in Colorado vertical letters SCL for special call sign license. And then I have my call sign. My wife has her call sign on her car, and I think they're great. I have not ever had a problem with doing that. Like to know about ground radials. That's a bit of a controversial subject. It depends on what type of antenna that you have. If you, he says, how to use radials when you're close to a structure that might disallow use of radials on one side. The propagation will tend to favor the direction of what radials you do have. I'm assuming you're putting in a vertical antenna. If you've got the antenna up in the air, 20 feet, 30 feet, something like that, you can put in radials that are up in the air in the same plane as the antenna. So you've got your vertical antenna coming this way, and you've got your radial field out here. You only need about 2 radials opposite each other for each band, and they should be tuned to the band. So if you want 40-meter radials, they should be 33 feet on each side for a total of 66 feet. Then you can put in a pair of radials this way for 20 meters, 15 meters, and so on. The length, if you're going to put them on the ground, just put down as much wire as you can. I think I've got somewhere close to 30 radials on my antenna. They're random length, and it works pretty well. There's, I got to tell you, more heat than light on the subject of radials. If you do have a ground-mounted vertical antenna, yes, you need radials. Yes, you need quite a number of them to do really well. I would try at least 8 and go up from there if you can. What I did was got a roll, 250-foot roll of wire from Home Depot of just single black THHN wire, and just started laying out radials like crazy. And then I had another roll of that kind of wire that I used for a horizontal loop antenna, which I took down, cut up, and made even more radials. So there's about 500 feet worth of radials. And as you can tell with the price of copper these days, radials are not free. So figure those into the cost of the antenna when you put the antenna in. I also have a radial plate from DX Engineering that makes connecting them much easier.
Tim, call sign K6CA, wants to know about the SDR Duo versus the SDR2.
Well, the SDR Duo is the newer machine. There's 3 in the lineup. There's the SDR Play. They're all made by SDR Play. There's the SDR Uno, the 2, and the Duo. The Duo has more independence between the 2 channels. So you can be listening in VHF at the same time you're listening on HF. I've never used an SDR2, so I can't really comment on it. What I have in my station is the SDR that's got the single input, and I found that that does everything that I need personally. It sounds like you've got a lot of experience with SDRs. The SDR2 has some advanced front-end work to give you a little bit more dynamic range, and also third-order intercept, and lots of exotic receiver things that'll make it a very nice receiver. So yeah, if that's the kind of thing that you need, yes, by all means get the SDR Duo. I did evaluate one and did a video on it fairly recently, and you can take a look at that. I've got pictures and stuff in there.
Joshua, call sign KC9HKW, wants to get your recommendation on his first HF rig.
Well, I'll tell you this about radios. Your first radio won't be your last. You'll want to upgrade. My first real radio as a novice was a Heathkit HW16, but that was Morse code only, so I upgraded to a Yaesu FT 201, which I used for quite a few years, and sold it to buy a computer modem back when computer modems were extremely expensive. I regret having sold that. I regret having sold the HW16. They were great radios. I think that the ICOM 7300, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's probably a good second radio, something to move up to. That probably what you might want to look at is something like the Yaesu FT450. ICOM also has some starter rigs. If you go with the ICOM 3000, be prepared for a very steep learning curve. It's like buying a Nikon camera as your first camera. And I know that with my camera, I have a Lumix G7 that I use to do the recording right now and do all of the shots that I do for this program. And most of the time I leave it in point and shoot mode and let it do all its focusing and exposure and all that sort of stuff, just like it's in point and shoot mode. There are sometimes, like when we're doing this recording, everything is manual. The exposure, the shutter speed, the frame rate, the focus, everything on it is manual. So I'm using the features of the camera for this particular use case. But it will be like that with your first HF rig. You'll figure out what are the equivalent of the point and shoot settings and leave it there for most of your QSOs. Occasionally you'll start doing things with it when it's a little hard to hear that other station and you really want to work them. That receiver on there is first class. The 7300 is ICOM's first foray into a fully SDR radio. And it's priced accordingly. So it's a mid-range radio. It's not a low-end radio. But go ahead, just be prepared to discover what your point and shoot settings are, and that will be where you will use it most of the time. But then when you're contesting or a field day or something like that, you want to learn to use those extra features.
All right, Rodney, call sign KA0USE, wants to know about scopes, their pricing and uses. Okay,
by scope he means oscilloscope. I have the Radials DS1040Z, I think it is. I'll have to double check that. If I'm wrong, you can put it up on the screen what the actual model is. I'm not an advanced ham. I'm a pretty average guy with 40 years of amateur radio experience. There are people who swear you can get good used scopes for $50. Yes, you can. They're analog scopes. They're not digital. They're big. The actual scope that I use is a very reasonable size. It's about like this, and it's only about 6 inches deep, about 8 inches high, and maybe 14 or 15 inches wide. I think I paid, well, it's in the low three figures for that one. The ones on eBay and, he says, the ones on eBay and Craigslist at that price look like barn finds and are sold for parts only. And then he asked me if I can do a show about scopes and what you can use them for in ham radio. They're absolutely outstanding for troubleshooting because then you can see what's going on. I have one example where I had a fox hunt hidden transmitter hunting apparatus that was supposed to switch back and forth between two antennas at an audio frequency and thus allow you to do some what's called time difference of arrival. And I noticed that the thing had a bias, a pronounced bias, and couldn't figure out why. And but I put the thing on the scope and went, oh, the square wave is not symmetric. So I played with it till I got the square wave to be symmetric on it, and it works fine. I would never have done that without a scope. In a video I did several weeks ago, you're going to see me use a scope to test out the switching feature of a MFJ circuit. There are lots of things that you can use it for. Do you have to have one? No. No. Do you need one? No. Are they a good toy later on down the road? Yes. Do I recommend them for beginners? No. But they're fascinating to work with, and they're great for demonstrating what waveforms actually look like. I'm about to redo the technician videos, and in there I will be using the scope to demonstrate some of the waveforms and some of the things that can happen.
All right. Donald, call sign KC9ZMY, has a question about Coax purchases.
Mm-hmm. There's a fairly recent Ask Dave video where I interview the owner of, or part owner of one of the coax companies where you can get coax. My shack isn't where I want it. Yes, I need to run some long lengths of coax. Is it better to buy long cables pre-made to length and then possibly have to coil them up? There's nothing wrong with that, or invest in a big spool of cable and the tools to put the ends on, which, by the way, is a kind of a non-trivial exercise. I've got a spool of LMR 400, and it just gives me fits every time I put a coax connector on it. My favorite cable is RG8X, but that's for 100 watts. The real cost of this is about a wash. You might actually save money by getting the pre-made cables. Now, if you go to Coax USA, coaxusa.com, there's a company there called MPD Digital, and it will allow you to order custom cables. You can get them any length you want. Now, I will warn you, carefully run a string exactly where you're going to run that cable, and then carefully measure the length of that string, and you will be very surprised to find it is much longer than you thought it was going to be. And then order an extra 10 feet on top of that, because cables take circuitous routes. And remember, if you've got, like, for example, a dipole that's 30 feet in the air, you've got 30 feet of cable just to get to the ground. And then you've got the run over to where you've got your lightning arrestor at your station ground, and you want cable ends at that, and then you want cable ends from there going on into your shack, and you may want to move your shack to the other side of the room or something like that. So yes, order a little bit long, but you can order them with the ends already attached very securely, I recommend Coax USA because the owner's been on Ask Dave now 3 times, and it's some outstanding presentations on quality coax, how to avoid the cheap Chinese stuff that isn't really what it appears to be, and get good quality stuff that will last you for years.
All right, Steve, call sign AAOMV, has a question about an antenna's effectiveness.
Okay, Steve, there's an all-band vertical for sale on eBay that uses a resistor network made of some kind of metal. The patent notes show the network connects to a 21-foot radiator. How could this arrangement be an effective antenna? If you're trying to create heat, it would be very effective. There should not ever be a resistor network as part of an antenna except for a rhombic. Now, a rhombic actually radiates only half the power fed to it, and the other half goes away in that resistor. The other half would go in the other direction if it were not for the resistor network. And rhombics have such high gain and low radiation angles that it makes up for that. Otherwise, no, don't get yourself an antenna with a resistor network in it. All that's going to do is create heat. I'm sorry, I have no faith in an antenna like that. Well, thank you for watching Ask Dave. Remember, you can submit a question at hamradioanswers@gmail.com or going to dcasler.com/ask-dave. Also, please remember the tip jar, and also you can put in the tip jar in increments of $1, and more, of course, is greatly appreciated. It helps make this a viewer-supported channel. And let's see, there's a bunch of great links to Amazon items, radios, things like that that you might find useful at dcasler.com/support. So there you have it. I hope to meet you on the air. Until we next meet, 73.